There we go. Councilmember Valento. Councilmember Erickson.
Here.
Councilmember Roberts.
Here.
And Mayor Bain.
Here, I'd like to invite everyone to rise and join us for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We have open forum on the agenda this evening. Is there anybody signed up for open forum? No. That's fine. Okay. We will move into our scheduled workshop topics tonight. Just quick notice, we do that this is a working session of council, a working session that council's receiving initial information for the first time and our opportunity to kind of digest and work with staff. Anything we talk about tonight that requires official action will come forward at future meetings, and in particular on tonight's budget or tonight's agenda, most likely in future budget discussions, but we're kind of continuing a lot of those budget conversations this evening, and this is a working session to do so. With that, we have a couple of parks topics on the agenda to kick us off. And Jamie, you want to start with an Arts in the Park update?
Sure. So thank you, Mayor and members of the council, for having me here today. I am going to talk a little bit about Arts in the Park for 2023. As you all know, it's every Tuesday, June through August. This year we do have the 4th of July does fall on Tuesday, so we will not have Arts in the Park that night. And our event will run from 5 to 9 at Lakeside Memorial Park. So I'm just going to take you through a quick overview. I do have some time at the end for any questions, but we're looking forward to getting this kicked off here in a few weeks. So we are at full capacity with our vendors this year, and we have different categories of vendors at the event. So handmade products, people that are making their own arts and crafts and selling them in the park, farmers market vendors, commercial products, food trucks, and community member nonprofits that aren't there to do any sales and just provide information to the community. So this is our current breakdown. One thing I just wanted to note is we've really increased the number of handmade vendors over the years, and it's really turning more into that art fair, which is really good to see. And out of all the applicants we've received, I want to say over half of them are Forest Lake residents, and then just, you know, really strong in the surrounding areas. We do have a few people coming in from, you know, other communities closer to the metro, but a lot of local, which is really great to see. So I've been happy to see that product category really increase as we've continued to expand and grow the event. So we are no longer accepting applications. We're full for the season, but that's a little breakdown of where we're at with our vendors. Food trucks, this obviously they play a key role in our event. A lot of people are coming over for the evening for dinner. We added last year 2 different food trucks, so we added a total of 8, which we will have again this year. We did run into a few issues last year with a couple really excessive heat days, which inside a food truck was 110 degrees. Some food trucks didn't work. Some people had staffing issues. So takeaway from after last year was just, you know, making sure we have enough food trucks. Our lines can get long at time, and then just more kid-friendly options. So this year, again, we are going to have 8 food trucks. We have quite a few returning. And then I'm happy to announce we do have a couple new ones this year that we're excited to add to the mix. Smoking on Site is a barbecue food truck, which was pictured previously. So there's a little look at what they're going to be offering. The Forest Lake Lions is going to have their food trailer, so more of that quick family-friendly dinner items. And Camilla's Taqueria is authentic Mexican food. So Kona Ice, they have the slushies. Yummy Food is going to be Greek, and then our egg rolls and traditional Taco Palace. So excited. I think that'll really help bring them a little bit more well-rounded options for people at the park this year. And then the ever popular concert series. This is a picture from last year. So it's really continued to grow over the last couple of years, and we've really enjoyed a lot of different groups out at the park. So our lineup this year is on our website, and we kick off in 3 weeks from tomorrow with Sean and Ian Akamoto. They were our only rain out last year, so we put them first on the schedule. But as you'll see, we have some familiar favorites from last year, as well as some new groups. Ladies of the 80s, we have Church of Cash coming back. Chris Cruzy, he's always been a really big turnout that every night that he's been here. So we really try to provide something for everybody and really encourage the community to come out and enjoy a night in the park. Lastly, you'll see 2 dates that are denoted as kids and family night. So what we'll do on those evenings, we'll have kid-friendly programming earlier on, starting around 5 or 5:30 until 6:30. We still will have the regular scheduled concert at 6:30 to 8:30. And then we're working on building out different activities that kids can do throughout the park that evening. So whether it's the Wildlife Science Center, the Baron of Bubbles, whatever that might be, we're building out some activities to carry on through the night for the kids and family nights. So that's listed here. We also have Night to You at Night is August 1st this year, and we always work with the PD. They have a really great presence almost on a weekly basis, but we expand a little bit more on Night to You Night at the park, and then we'll end the season with our community corn feed August 29th. I think that was my last slide, so we'll go to questions in a minute. We are also exploring the sponsorship opportunities this year for local businesses to get involved. So we're starting to work on that, and really by next summer have a full plan for the whole summer. But we've got a lot of businesses interested in being involved in the event too. So working on that here as well. So with that, I'm happy to entertain any questions from council.
Council, any questions for Jamie? Appreciate the update. It's great.
We're looking forward to it. Hopefully nice weather like tonight.
Yeah.
We will have a good summer if that's the case.
How many rainouts did you have last year?
We only had 1 rain out. We did have 2 excessive heat days, which were pretty tough, but we got through it, and I was actually surprised at how much the community came out on those really hot days. So yeah, it was good.
I have a question, and I probably should know this, but being again new, like the budget, and that comes out of normal budget for all the bands and that, and what is typically a price point? Is it all over the board, or?
Yep, no, that's a great question. It is budgeted annually in the parks program budget. So we have an entertainment budget. And what we do is we can't have every night be like the big band and cost more money. So we do balance that out over the course of the year. And so this year we have about 4 that are in that 500 to 750 range per night, a couple in that 4 in the mid range of like about 1,000, 1,500, and then there's a 4 in the higher end range of around $2,000 a night. And it's really been effective, really getting more people to the park. I think it's really been helpful, and that really entices the business community. There's a lot of, like I said, people that want to have that marketing exposure and opportunity and to really be a part of the event. So I think that's really going to help us as we develop a sponsorship plan and packages for the community to get more people involved in that way too. They'll get a lot of impressions for how many people are coming out.
Councilor Roberts, just as a follow-up, the entire program series costs the city a little over $20,000 a year.
With 8 food trucks, are those 8 food trucks generally planned at each event, each night?
Correct.
Yeah.
Yep, full season.
And are most of the breakout that you showed us of vendors by type, are those also committed generally for the full season?
Yes.
Yeah,
We typically see the nonprofits select more like a handful of days throughout the summer, so we just slot them in, but majority, 95% or more, are full season vendors, which is great. So
We were to think about expansion on any topic, like if it's expansion of vendors or expansion of participation, how much room, would you say we're kind of at optimal size for vendor mix, or is there, I know we've kind of gone up and down over the years, and what are your current thoughts?
yeah, I would say right now, I feel like we're at that pretty much optimal space of what we've done, and that's having myself expanding that over the last couple of years. So we've added spaces in the last 2-3 years, and right now it feels comfortable, but in a good, like, I think we're at capacity. City staff have explored and had some discussions about how could we increase the number of food trucks and where we would put them. So we do have a little bit of opportunity there, but of course then that would be taking away some additional parking. And so we've had a little bit of a conversation there, but always welcome to any thoughts that you might have on that. It's kind of that give and take, and it sometimes is like a puzzle piece of getting the food trucks all in and positioned and set to go. So expanding, we're just gonna have to take up some of the parking if we do decide to do that.
Do the vendors pay for that privilege of being there?
Yes, we do have vendor fees. The slide where I show the different product types. We have a fee schedule in our annual fee schedule that lists the amount that each type of vendor, the fee that each vendor pays. We've had the same fees probably for about 2 or 3 years. It seems like our demand for vendor booths has been pretty high, so we had a waiting list last year. People are still inquiring, so I think we want to have that conversation as we get to, budget conversations and fee schedules for 2024.
At least that helps offset some of your costs.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I believe, and I can send this out as a follow-up, but I believe last year, I think it brings in about $7,000 to $8,000 in revenue from vendor fees. And then adding a sponsorship package will really help with that as well.
I like the, trying to be as much of a break-even event as possible. I mean, it's, or not to be a moneymaker for the event, which is always give and take, and I love that it's accessible to local artisans in particular, and, some of the food trucks is really, I mean, all of the vendors, some of those margins are really tight, so it's a balance.
Yep.
Also maybe a good opportunity, as you mentioned, for exploring some, sponsorship opportunity or some things that.
Yep. Questions?
Any other questions or feedback for Jamie? All right. Good.
Thank you.
Thank you for the update.
You're welcome.
All right, with that, should we move on to special event planning? And Abby.
Sure, I'm just going to introduce this. So over the last maybe about 6 months, we started to, after the adoption of the downtown plan last summer, really look at how we're doing our current programming in our parks. The downtown plan calls for more events, more programming. And so we have formed a committee, and I don't want to say too much. Jamie's been really spearheading this group and keeping us on track, but really trying to analyze how are we reviewing, what types of events do we have in our community, how are we reviewing them, how can we streamline this, how can we make process improvements to be more consistent in event permitting in the future, especially in the case if we would include more programming and events in the community. So I'll let Jamie take it over.
All right, thank you again. So I did provide a staff memo in the packet for today, so I'm gonna go over a lot of that, and just want to take a few minutes to take it one step further to explain what we've been doing internally and what the goals and objectives are and desired outcomes. So again, just the background, as a committee, we all sat down and talked about what different events come forward within the city, whether they're public in the park or private events in the park. Karen oversees our outdoor entertainment permits, so she had a list of things that come through her door on her desk, and so collaboratively we put a list together, and we were quite surprised at how many events there really are in the community, and they all differ in types of events, where they're located, different requests and requirements, whether it's alcohol consumption, gambling, tent permits, liquor license, etc. So there's a lot of different asks depending on the different event. Some of these events, the Twin Cities Powerboat Races, which is an annual event that comes into Forest Lake and is downtown at the park. St. Peter's Annual Fall Festival. We have the Rotary Plunge. There's an annual block party, and then there's other private events that come forward. So a lot is coming our way, and like I said here, there's a lot of different steps in this process and different avenues that people have to go through and different application forms. So what we're trying to do as a group is really improve that process. We know, as Abby mentioned, activation was really one of the directives of the downtown plan, and we really want to improve this process before we, proactively, as we hope to grow activation and encourage events to come forward. We want it to be not only more efficient and effective for staff from a resource standpoint, but just also inviting and easy for the event organizers. So this is just kind of our why, is our big why, is really get ready for more activation in the community. So our desired outcomes, really it's just to coordinate the review of permitting of community events and in a coordinated effort across all departments. So we're all sitting down at the table, going through existing permits and application requests, so that we can all be at the table and talk about the different needs and what that might mean from a city resources perspective. Guide policy development relating to the review of this. So looking at our current ordinances, what do we have that might need to change, what's missing, and so this group's gonna always have a policy discussion at our meetings. A big one is improving the application process. So you'll see, this is just like a quick sneak peek, or what we're looking to do is one form where it's, going to be very detailed and have all of the potential event requirements on there, that it's one applicant goes through and fills out the whole thing. Somebody might just need, an outdoor entertainment permit, and that might be it. And some might have several things on there. So we're looking to convert to one application that can be all encompassing of what people might want to do for the event, and improve that process internally of where that goes and how that's functioning through our group. And a big part of that too is then that will help develop standardized processes and around our special events process and approvals. So one of the challenges is, do we need public safety at a specific event? And if so, what's that cost? And what's that threshold? Is it a quantity of people? Is it, alcohol consumption? So those are some of the things we really want to provide a standard for, so that when an application comes through, we can look at it and it's the same for everybody, and we just know what we need to do as staff and what those costs are. So those are our desired outcomes of the group. We've been meeting once a month, and so far it's been really effective to get everyone at the same table and talk about the events coming forward. So with this is again just kind of a draft snapshot. We've built out a timeline for this. We're going to continue to work through some of the, obviously right now it's really heavy for event season, so we have quite a few events on our list that we're going to continue to talk about, and then really continue that policy development and a special events form to be created over the next several of months. Somewhere down here in the fall, we'll continue to have some city council workshop discussion, continue doing stakeholder engagement later in the fall, but we really would like to get this completed at the end of this year so that it can be fully implemented in 2024. So for tonight, again, it's an introduction to you on what we're starting to work on, and just looking for any council direction and feedback. And I have a few things listed here of the process of special events. We can talk about what that approval process should look like. If we do convert to one form, currently, some things come, outdoor entertainments come forward to city council. Would we want all of them? What level of approval? Charging fees for public services, and just general thoughts on, the future of events and safety and all of the things related. So happy to answer any questions, or would appreciate any feedback or comments you have tonight.
Mayor Bain, if I might, I'm not sure if Jamie and I mentioned, but we have representation from every department in the city on the special events team. So everybody that's sitting in the room, maybe with the exception of Kevin, has so far been a part of the conversations. It's not that finance hasn't been involved and knows what's going on, but their time has been spent using other things more wisely. So
That's helpful. Questions, feedback? Do you want to suggest Pepper open it up?
I think if any open comments that come to mind right away, open to that, whatever, if there's anything specific that what comes to mind, or that you'd like us to look into further as we continue to move forward.
A question that comes to mind, and this is a big potentially a big cost factor. How do we decide today on when public safety is involved? I think about, the level of effort that we do for the 4th of July, and, the use of, I think we use almost, we use police and fire extensively, and we also are using public works and bringing out snowplows and dump trucks to block traffic. And I mean, that's a heavy lift versus there's others. Like, what is that? Has it been a standard process so far? And it seems like maybe the answer is no, we're heading there. Is it been more of a tradition, or how are we deciding that today?
You want to take that
Sure.
one?
So it's kind of been tradition, and there has been a standard, but there hasn't. And that's the whole reason why we're coming up with this committee, is we started realizing when we all started talking together, I'd be talking to Dave about, maybe getting barricades for a certain event, and or maybe employees to assist with something, whatever that might be. And then he didn't realize that he needed to maybe help out, whereas he might, in some other event, they didn't know that we needed help out. different things happen, like the Leo Temple
Yeah.
celebration that started like 6, 7 years ago. You know, that was something brand new. So we had no idea what to expect. And that first year, I think they brought in close to 10,000 people, and we had no idea. And we were ready for it, but we definitely needed more officers there. It impacted traffic on the roadways, impacted security. You know, we don't sit there and, you know, card people or things like that. But it's just things like that just came up, and we started all talking over the last couple of years and realized that we really needed to come together and collaborate, and that we can make this a little bit more efficient. So, you know, there's things that have been going on for years and years, 4th of July. So we've just learned over the years, and we've adapted and each and every year and learned from the year prior. Whereas some of these other ones are just brand new, and we weren't sure. And when it comes to, do we need police officers there? It's, once again, we're kind of learning from different events that we've had. There's been a couple events where there's alcohol in the park years ago. I'm sorry, in municipal Muni lot, and we decided we needed to have some officers there. Not so much carding and things like that, but just to be there as a presence, because we didn't know how big this event was going to be, and ended up not being super large, but I mean, they were talking thousands of people. So that's kind of how that's happened, and it's evolved over time. But this is really the reason why we came together, is to really communicate on what needs we might need, what needs Public Works might need, fire, parks. So that's kind of where we're at.
Just one other comment on that too. So for example, in my parks world, if there's alcohol consumption in the park, there is a permit for that. So that's just another separate form that somebody would have to get from me to fill out. And then the approval process for that is, you know, Parks Commission and Chief of Police. So there are some things in place like that, but I think just really building it out to have it all encompassing of what, based on event type. And I think one thing we've talked about internally is how do we classify different, you know, categorize different types of events, you know, so that's one of our things we really want to, if you have any feedback on that, if it's, you know, obviously we have like the public, private, how do we categorize them? And then maybe that'll help us to determine some of those criteria for standardizing what's required.
A couple quick questions. This application that's being developed, is it going to be available online and, you know, electronic?
Yeah, so currently we have our outdoor entertainment permit and permit with tent online, so we would be able to get this online as well.
And then, you know, if it's a public event like Arts in the Park, I mean, the city does some marketing of that on social media and other things. Is there an element in this application where the organizers would indicate if they'd want some support marketing it? Not that it's become city staff's job, but, you know, an opportunity to, like, say, partner with the Chamber of Commerce to just continue to push out, hey, there's activities happening in the city, let's get the word out. Is that integrated into that application at all?
I don't believe we've incorporated any kind of that marketing communications component on the application, but it's certainly something we can look at adding or explore that a little further of how they plan to promote. I think there was maybe one community we looked at had like a public outreach or PR component to that, media.
We will be requesting, if they have a specific person for PR and media, one, to help reduce some of the questions that sometimes municipalities can get when you've got these private events, public events coordinated by private individuals. The chamber has also been building out its website, as you probably know, and does have a community events calendar. So Nanette has advised that once we start to review a permit and would review it and approve it, that they're more than willing to put all of that on their community calendar. The idea being that we as a community would have one centralized kind of events calendar to really be highlighting and showcasing all the events, be, you know, any of the public events, certainly. We haven't explored any of our resources, staff time. We don't have internal marketing, communication, PR, but we are trying to find ways that we can explore those partnerships in the community. So.
Yeah, that'd be great. Thank you.
It's always going to be a balance between public safety and burden, you know, to whoever's applying for this. So I hope that's part of your conversation So we want to make it easy, well, reasonable, let's put it that way.
So currently in moving forward, is there a fee structure? You know, you talk about all one permit, but then if you're going down, like an outdoor permit, tent, park, so each one, would that increase a fee, so to speak, to what the event would be? And is there any thought of doing it differently versus a nonprofit versus a for-profit? Is that been talked about? And I guess, you know, I would suspect that, you know, what about, Rick, Chief, what do you think for the 4th of July, what do you guys budget for man hours? Like that's an expensive proposition for the city, right, each year?
It is, and I actually have it, probably, it'd take me just a couple minutes to find it, but I'd say ballpark, it's anywhere from 28,000 to close to $40,000 for just police officers.
Is that just officer overtime?
Yeah, we started, I believe, it was a few years ago that I believe when you were both on the council, that it was asked how much it was. And I think at that year it was like 24,000, and, you know, of course, things just cost more. And we have more presence out there too with different things that have happened around the world and at different events. So, and same with Dave and bringing Public Works in and the trucks in and the cleaning afterwards and, you know, those types of things. A lot of people don't realize that that happens, and there is a cost to it, of course.
Mayor Bay and members of the council, we also as a committee are tracking our time as part of the review and permitting processes, the actual event processes, each of the departments trying to keep track of those that might help us better align our fees, or at least inform the conversation as we get more in depth about talking about fees later this year, of what this is really costing the community, costing the city. So.
I do think, you know, as special event public safety becomes more and more of a need, unfortunately, I think it's going to prompt us to start thinking about what identifying certain events, and I don't know if it's something that should be like an annual approval or something, but there are certain events that are kind of co-city sponsored, where the city, you know, we are providing those police services for the 4th of July, for example. You know, that is a city-provided service, versus there's going to be other events that are smaller in scale that may need some level of police. You know, I think about maybe an event in the park that has alcohol and a large number of people, that, you know, isn't to the scale of the 4th of July, but also is going to require some level of maybe, you know, police staffing that, you know, I wouldn't want there to be a perception that because we do it for the 4th of July, we automatically do it on all events. I'm not sure that we're going to be able to provide that, but that probably requires some definition on what fits in which bucket. And I think there's, you know, we have an appetite to support and, you know, activate many different types of events, but there's certainly a certain classification of events that we want to support, but it might have to be at, you know, the host is, you know, it's sponsored and included in that, you know, event fees. I think about some of, like, for example, some of the events that happen at Lakeside Park, the participants that are participating in that and enjoying that activity pay in fees, and, you know, that some of that should, you know, naturally go towards creating a safe environment, and which is different than 4th of July and thousands of people to see fireworks at Lakeside Memorial Park.
That answer your question? You're good.
One of your questions is around council feedback and or council approval, and I guess my preference, and I'm open to very open to other suggestions, but just off the cuff, I'm inclined to that, you know, council's role and park commission's role should be around setting the policy. And if someone wants an exception to the policy, then that comes forward. I appreciate what we have today for the entertainment permits, you know, coming through the consent agenda, for example. It's just good to know what's going on in the community. I would even, though, be okay with us moving to a ratification process where staff's already approved, it's moved on its way, and we are just more reviewing and ratifying after the fact. unless there's something that's an exception. I think if we've got a well-defined policy and a well-defined process and you all are working towards, the cohesive, I'm not sure we add a lot. And it certainly, from a timing perspective and, these are things that, I think about, some of our community, somebody needs a last minute gambling permit because they want to do some, type of small gambling event, and they realize at the last minute, their volunteer organization, shoot, this is Friday and no one's gotten the permit. And then, I think actually us being so restrictive actually encourages some level of non-compliance, that if we had a little bit of a less restricted process around timing through council agenda, might just help some of those organizations come more into compliance. My 2 cents. Any other thoughts on that?
So are you saying that it wouldn't be on the, not even part of the consent agenda?
I'm okay having it on the consent agenda, but I think it's more of a, when I say ratify, it's more of we are affirming we're affirming what staff has already approved, and it's already kind of essentially after the fact, more of a heads up to us that it happened. Maybe that doesn't belong on the consent agenda, but I guess I'm trying to find the balance of us having the notification. Maybe it comes through the weekly report or something, or some other mechanism, so we can just see what's going on. And,
I think we have thought that there's probably different, again, these different types of applications might necessitate council review. Others may not. Maybe it's the first time the event happens, it comes to the council, and then every year thereafter, it's administrative, so I think we have, plenty of time to kind of flush through that. We'll be looking at other communities and how they review and process these types of events as well. But I agree with you, Mayor Bain, there's a number of events or types of permits that we have that likely could be administratively approved. The code is there. We're checking boxes just to make sure that they meet the code, and away they go. And certainly we can provide you, mostly during the summer, I would imagine, or those more seasonable months, those weekly updates of here's what's coming up in a couple weeks or next week, this weekend.
recent example, the graduation party that just is going to have a little bit of amplified music for a few hours, administratively approve it. The graduation party that wants to close a street for a band, maybe we're hitting a no and probably hitting a council, affirming that that is the right decision. So.
Right.
So the question becomes really, what triggers that permit necessity? So there has to be some kind of a line there someplace.
Yeah, I agree. And in the past, it's really been for the
Graduation parties
outdoor.
are a great example. I mean, are we gonna license every one of them? No.
And that has been with current code, the outdoor entertainment permit, the trigger really is just that amplified music. So Tracker Boat Races has come down to the park for a fishing tournament. They're gonna use the sound system. They've been triggered to then apply for this outdoor entertainment permit, but it's like a 2-hour event. They're probably making a couple announcements, but it's how our code is written that requires it. So changing that trigger, what is it? And then what are those handful of events that may have alcohol or over 500, what are those criteria to have it be a council review versus administrative approval?
I guess I like the idea of it in a consent agenda, in that it comes in the packet and you can see it. If someone were to reach out to any of us individually and say, hey, they had this event last year and X, Y, and Z happened and I'm not real happy about it, having a heads up to that before that person were to reach out to you would be kind of nice, I guess. But not that I want to micromanage the whole situation.
And maybe that's just part of the notification process as the application comes in. Like we just get a quick notification, heads up, this came in, but it's kind of separate from what's coming through the council packet.
Some communities do also require event organizers to notify neighborhoods as part of their application. So again, we can explore a lot of how this is done, what's been done, to kind of bring back before you some recommendations of if this, then that type of thing, to really see where we're comfortable. It's nice to get the preliminary feedback from all of you, though, to hear like, yeah, maybe we don't need to review these, but there's some that we should be reviewing, and giving the public, this is our public space This is one way that we're advising the community of what's going on. And so those are all things that we'll keep in mind.
Do we also, I'm just on the path of what could go wrong, do we also include, do we have that application include who their primary safety contact is? You just think about something's gone wrong and like, do we know that, and is that information in the hands of?
That is something that would be included in this one application form, and then certificate of liability insurance is required. We are collecting that for different events as well, so. But having a safety, a new thing we've talked about as a group is having event organizers providing safety plans, and then having that run through our emergency management team for review, and if there's additional questions or concerns, then our emergency management team can reach out with, we need more information, or this isn't sufficient. So that is a new conversation we're having as well, just really focusing on that public safety.
That end, sorry to cut you off, but
Okay.
to that end, if we could provide a template that just, we're not just giving you a blank sheet of paper asking for your public safety plan, but if we could give you just an easy template of some of the primary factors we're looking for you to consider, I just think that makes that so much easier for people to put together. And I don't want to create a 50-page form, but also a blank sheet of paper on something like a safety plan is tough for somebody who's not used to putting together a safety plan. Chief and, Chief and the captain probably have their top 5 questions they ask of every event. Maybe, I don't know, just
I
making
think
sure
that
we've
sounds
got
good,
something.
some guidelines.
And we are definitely exploring, like City Minneapolis, City of St. Paul. We're not reinventing the wheel. We're asking a lot of the very same things that big events are asking for with those, please think about X, Y, Z and detail that out. So.
Other question or points of feedback? Of what you need of us?
I think so.
I do. Thank you for
Yeah,
your feedback
this has
and
been great.
listening. Yeah, appreciate it.
Perfect. I'm really happy we're heading down this path and trying to make it as much one-stop shop as possible. It's good.
That was me. Sorry about that. I saw it too. I was like, that's gonna happen. Thank you, Patrick.
Brings us to our next topic tonight, which is our 10-year plan update, and this is the Parks and Building version of the 10-year plan. The Parks and Building episode, right? We're in episode 3 of the 10-year plan. Oh, yeah.
Now you like this.
Last chapter, season 1.
trying to get out of that catch-up mode and get it so that we can level any property tax. We went through this with the water fund, the sewer fund, about 4 years ago, where the funds were in difficulty. We had to raise some water rates, like 11 to 18%. But you only do it one raise, 2, 3%, minimize it. That allows us to, again, predict as not only council members and staff, but as the public, where their property tax goes. Typically, that's the real goal. It's really surprising. As far as the park goes, we're going to talk about, its history is that we have had no property tax funds for the park since 2021. Similar to what we did with the streets, the first year that we applied property tax fund maintenance for, well, on park improvement. There is some maintenance within the public works budget, but for park improvements, we really didn't fund very much, if at all. We added in 2021 $50,000. And then in 2022, did a swap. We didn't find any much equipment as far as the equipment fund, so we swapped the levy there to give the park a little more money in breathing room as far as the fund balance goes. We were anticipating Bells Park coming in reconstruction, so we needed some kind of infusion of cash. But that's the second little infusion we did. If you recall, some of you were on council when we created to the park dedication fund. At some point in the past, there was an interfund loan to the park fund for construction and things like that, and they were paying it out annually. So that was paralyzing the park, new park projects off. So
Was the building of Fenway Park, right? The original build?
was building Fenway Park. So that paralyzed the park fund. It wasn't, they were getting to do any more major improvements or anything that minor. And right now in the 2022 budget, 23 budget, excuse me, we have $50,000 for tax levy. And we probably anticipate that to be okay today, but then initially it's not good. You may ask, what's the park dedication fund? Well, the park dedication fund comes from basically an impact fee from council's construction tax. Well, that's subject to how many houses are built and how many new developments we have or what kind of lots split. It's going to be good years and you can do bad. And for example, 22, our revenue was $3,500. Can't do a lot with $3,500. That's, we didn't have a lot of buildings and lots of buildings. We have budgeted for this year and probably we look at budgeting what we want next year for the park dedication. We budgeted $75,000. Probably, like for this year, that's up. Any reason that we're going to have a number of homes come in before the end of the year. We're already too far in the year for that. That is. Maybe next year, or maybe we'll get some this year where we can make that part of the vacation. But right now, 75,000 budgeted, but we realistically have.
If we were to take a long-term average of what, I mean, I know it's up and down, but is there a,
No, I mean, I think there is, it really is. We can go back that year to see, but I think it was a skewed.
be nice to see at least like a high water mark, right? Like low water mark is clearly close to zero, but it'd be nice to see what a high water mark.
Years ago, there was 400,000.
Yeah, so back in 2020. So back in 2021, it looks like it was about 400, about 400,000. The year before that, it was 50,000. And then about 430,000. Find the history back here, 2010. It really does vary back in 2010, it was 140,000, and then in 2012 and 2013, it was about 2,000. And then back up 200,000 down to 100,000. So it just really just depends on that development that comes in. What Patrick says is looking at the history of the balances in this fund.
that a
Glad
rate?
those funds came in, it appears that those funds were used to pay that.
That arrangement wasn't that arrangement that half of all park dedication fees paid the interfund loan and then the other half was available? So,
That was policy.
okay.
Mayor Bain, if I might also add, in 21, I think it was 2020, 21, the state did provide some guidance to cities on how park land dedication can actually be calculated and obtained by the city. And so there needs to be a nexus for us to be charging parkland dedication fees. Now with our newer developments, we will be seeking, in new developments, ideally, we'll be seeking land in lieu of a fee so that those neighborhoods will actually have parks within close proximity to them. We've had a number of neighborhoods built without parks. So even though we might have seen these highs and lows, it's more likely that we're going to see lesser numbers going into the future as we're going to want to have more parkland dedicated. And then also that ability to charge parkland dedication is scrutinized a lot differently.
So what's the need for park dedication? If the
Hmm.
20% pocket, $6.5 million to fund deferred maintenance. What is one equipment? $6.5 million. That will get us through 2027. That will catch us up to all the 2027. And that number, that will get to and that includes 20, some fund developed part as well, even though we have some dedicated money now and definitely we need additional money to develop part also. And then once we get to 2027, we have the ongoing maintenance. Is after 2027, there's a big ask, I think it's $4.5 million for the expansion and upgrade of Fenway Fields. That's in the plan. That's something we need to look at in the future and how we're going to fund it. Is that in partnership with law? Is that through bonding? Is that through we go to bond for legislation ask for bonding? So that's enough out in the future in 2028 that we can start to plan for that, but we have to put that in the plan. We have 10 acres that have been dedicated for Fenway Field expansion, and that's an acre being done down. That's after 2027. So we can start to work on how we think we can fund that. The other thing we looked at this time is buildings. On your dais, there's a blue sheet here, and I wanted to just show you this as an example. The council approved contract with the firm that to go through 3 buildings that we have that are not utility buildings. This building, senior center, and the south garage, which houses the ambulance for health. I just wanted to show you an example of what this firm did. They went through this building, identified everything, and put it on a schedule for its replacement. So at least we have an idea of when it's going to come due. This is only a few days worth of but it shows, most of the things here were installed in 2013 when it was built. And then it gives lifespan in the year it needs replacement and due to dollar value. So at least we have an idea of somewhere where it comes. For example, if you look at this structure at some of the acoustic panels. See the ring panels over here, they're starting to. Those are the things we've identified that will have to be repaired. But you look at lighting, you look at carpeting, you look at everything that's in the building. What we don't want to do in this building is what we've done with streets and parks is get behind. Because somebody, not me, will be here in about 10 years or 15 years and say, hey, guess what? You've got to spend $15 million to upgrade the building. We don't want to do that. We want to plan now. We want to allocate money now so you can repair. Now, the thing about this is, and the nice thing about this plan is every year you will go through and say, okay, do I really need to carpet tile in these interviews? Or are they in good shape enough we can get another year? So as the plan progresses, every year that will be reanalyzed and say, okay, maybe we can put the carpeting off another year. It's good, it's not more. We can not replace the toilets because the toilets. So every year that I encourage you, every year to good shape. We really don't need to move a lot of money until 2028. That's the start of some of the plans, but again, by 2028, we will have 2 years to reanalyze what the conditions of the provision is in this building. The senior center is, for its age, is not in bad shape. It needs some carpeting. If you recall, last year we had to replace all 5 HVAC units because they were over 30 years old and they broke down. We have a deck that's been built on and needed fixed. We have both, there are some lighting that we probably need to replace some of those, maybe even with LEDs or anything. So there's some minor things there that we need to fix. And then we have the south garage, which again, I say, houses the ambulance service and half of it's for public first storage. mHealth is interested in eventually renting the whole thing. But we have to figure that out, and there's a lot of needs there. We're going to put off the analysis of that until next year. Not that I want to put it off, but there's dynamic with parking lot and siding. And we rent it to mHealth, so is it worth renting to them? We need to spend, let's just say, $250,000. How is that going to relate to the rental? So there's a lot of moving parts to figure that out. So we're not recommending, it's in the plan, but we need to have a little more plan on that building, how we're going to fund it, and if we're going to repair it to the point, the building worth going to be repaired without a problem. And those are not really bad. We won't have the time to do that before this year's budget, but that's definitely something. And finally, before I let Kevin loose here, is that we have parts of buildings, we have 2 proposed options, obviously, for these. Both indicate a tax levy increase and both indicate a sizable deal on. So you're not surprised that I said that, but that's what happens here. Staff recommends that when you get to the park fund, that go through it, that we use option 1. And for buildings, we recommend $175,000 for next year, and then have that increase to $150,000 by 2026 for buildings. That'll get us to a point where we can start to fund and build the fund out to start to address some of this. That was real quick. It was real, don't know, any questions yet before I let that. Okay, our mics are not working, so we have to speak up a little bit. I'll let Kevin.
Okay, so we're gonna kick this off as the same way as that we've done streets and all the ones before. We're gonna start with the park fund and present two different scenarios on how that funds look. So like Patrick mentioned before, we're looking at a levy increase and some bond issues as the main source of funding in this park fund. So if you look up at the top on your first page, there's an unfunded capital and then in parentheses called increased levy. You can see in the 2023 budget, there's a $50,000 budget. We're proposing in this scenario to increase that to $500,000 and then maintain that level throughout the rest of the plan all the way out to 2033. With that though, right below that, you can see in 24 that there's still some capital needs remaining there of having to or a proposed bond issuance of $2.5 million. And then further down in 2028, as Patrick mentioned, a bond issuance proposed of $4.5 million. That is for Fenway, as he mentioned before, there will, once we get closer to that, look at different agencies. Are there grants available? What needs to be done? Are we going to do anything at that point? It's been identified, so come a couple, 3 years, we're starting to have those conversations and look at that. That number could change depending on how that route goes, but right now, if it was something we move forward with, that we're not sure of any grants or any special funding in that nature, so it's just proposed that it would be full bonds, maybe it'd be less, maybe it'd be more right down there. Right below, park dedication fees, almost towards the bottom, As we mentioned, that we had 75,000 in the 2023 budget, which at the time was very optimistic. Looking at it, putting an amount in there, 25,000, maintaining that flat for the next 10 years seemed reasonable. There was also some discussion if that's even feasible. So that is a factor in here, but then you're gonna have, we talked a little bit before, you're gonna have your good years, you're gonna have your bad years. And that's where you can look at when you get to those bond years and those levy years, maybe being able to adjust those slightly depending if those park dedication fees come in hopefully better than anticipated. But where we get to that on page 2, this is the plan that was put together by staff for all the different parks in the cities and in the city and the type of work that was to be, that is proposed and done at those parks. You can see starting in 2025, it's about 1.5 million all the way out till 2023. And various different parks doing various different things at those parks, and that just rolls up into top schedule as an expenditure. So how are we going to pay for basically 1.5 million a year?
The items on this list align with the park master plan update? Is that what this, where that comes from?
Correct. This came directly from that plan. I got this from Dave and Abby. I took that plan, plugged it into here, just made sure, took their total expenditures, tried to put it in a readable format so you can see here's the park, here's the type of work that's gonna be done. This is directly the schedule that they provided is transposed onto this schedule.
Mayor Bain, if I might just add, some of this is catch-up work. I think there's at least 3 years, if I'm right, Dave, that we're behind on just our standard replacement, 20-year replacement schedule. So the park plan does note that, but the park plan is really forward-thinking, and some of these you might see in the plan as not necessarily needs work now, but then to be put on the schedule for 20 years out.
That's something that's online or something that's,
It isn't available yet. It's just been in draft format because we have been in kind of a parks limbo. It's a plan that we had discussed, not necessarily releasing a draft until we were ready with a commission to work through final review and approval with the future commission of this council.
Is that, thank you for asking that
So-
question, because
so we're basing these numbers off of a draft of a plan. Is that what I'm?
We are basing these numbers off a draft of a plan, but that draft of a plan is utilizing a very industry-specific schedule for parkland replacement. There are some portions that you'll see in that capital improvement plan, such as like Fenway expansion. Those are things we heard about as part of our master plan process and update. Also, Summerfield Park, a very underutilized, is it Summerfield? Very underutilized park. We heard during the planning process that other improvements or areas where we're deficient in the community could be incorporated into the park, into Summerfield. So you'll see some of that in there. But a large portion of this plan in the first 10 years is really just catching us up with to get us back on our standard, regular routine development and replacement schedule.
That's something council can see, what, I mean, like, for newer people, like, something, right?
Mayor, member of council, the 2014 parks plan that we do have on our website, you'll see a lot of what Abby's talking about. Those are still pulled through from there, things that just weren't done because there was that lack of funding. So the park replacements, that is still pulling forward. And the master plan updates that staff's working on is the forward thinking of how do we develop that in the 10-year plan and align resources with it. So we're pulling some of that, and then we're really looking at the national standards of where we're deficient based on our community size and things of that nature. So it is pulling forward, and that 2014 plan is on there, but it's just a better roadmap moving forward.
Yeah, so in other words, our 2014 plan is our adopted plan. This is bouncing off of that.
Yep, and you'll see some of those things in there that still aren't done.
did that process did that process evaluate kind of our park inventory and we, like take, did that plan kind of take a look at our situation, which is we have a lot of we have a lot of parcels, and we have a lot of parcels that have been underinvested, either in the infrastructure that's on them or in the lack of maintenance of the infrastructure we do have, right? And so did that plan take a look at kind of the park distribution of, do we have the right number of parks?
We did. We compared ourselves with industry standards, essentially of the National Park and
Recreation and Park. Yep.
Recreation and Park. I knew I'd get it wrong
Association.
because it's a little.
NRPA, National Recreation and Park Association.
I believe I'd have to go back and look. I think we even did look at some of our peer communities as well, of where we were sitting in terms of per capita spending, per capita parks, per capita trails.
Well, in comparing that, how do we stack up
Low
in terms of number of parks or?
in terms of everything.
It's just such a hard, we're just this is just such a tough schedule to look at, because it is a big number that we have not historically funded, so it's a big change. But then my reaction when I look at this list is it's a lot of little things that we could do each of these things, and I'm not sure it's going to be at the end of the day what we are looking. Can you flip to the bond? Actually, I have it in front of me. So we're gonna, tell the community potentially that we're going to bond $2.5 million for parks. And there's so many little things on this list that it's easy to, it's a lot of small pieces. It's not there's not like a banner headline park. It's a,
Beyond Belts Park, it's difficult for the public to see that, or the neighborhood kind of sees that. That's the thing to talk about. It's not a big thing, it's just, the swing set's new, Junction's new, but the rest of it is sitting there. And so it's a hard perception to see that, exactly, to be that close to it.
go ahead.
On that 2014 plan, is that public input, and how did that come up? Like, you look at Shields Lake Park gazebo trail dock, is that, like, was there, like, the public said, hey, we really want something out there? Was there some history of how that came about, or?
I'm sure I was here for about it, but we grew. I'm sure there are a couple of experiences, couple of houses, just like we do with, we got community input on what they wanted, what they thought they saw, what they thought they needed. And then with the draft plan that we would get to some final form coming up, we did the same thing. There was input, there was surveys, public was involved, telling us what they needed. Some of it also in this whole plan is what staff, I mean, we see the playground that needs to be replacement because it's past the standard. But some of the improvements that you see in the playground, that's all.
We've, if I can recall history here, so in 2014, we built this master park plan, and then it seems like we shifted policy to say, and Jamie, you're gonna have to correct me on my history if I'm off track, but I think we shifted policy to say, okay, this is nice, and it's nice we've got this plan, but really, we're gonna focus on the 3 premier parks. We're gonna focus on Fenway, we're gonna focus on Belts, and we're gonna focus on Lakeside. And was that a actual, am I correct in that there was more of a focus for a period of time, and that from an effort and certainly
Yeah,
dollars
so-
spent, there was less priority on some of these?
So I was also not here in 2014 when the plan was developed, and since I have been here, it's been communicated that it's just really a guiding document and as funding allows. Through my time, the first few years were really, anytime park dedication came in, 50%, like we talked about, went to the interfund loan, and we had 50% available. So when I started, we had $0 in the park dedication fund, and slowly over the years built that up a little bit. So our capital improvement plan, because there was never a tax levy request to the council, it was always park dedication funded. It was the same 5 projects for like year after year after year. And in my role, we never have developed the 10, 15 years because the same 5 projects kept just moving down
Roll them over.
annually. And it was things with Fenway Park, Belts Park, Lakeside needed new equipment. So it's just been shuffling it down. And just as, you know, earlier in the presentation, since I've been here, the 2021 was the first time there was any tax levy dollars to parks. So we've really tried to, as a parks department and with the commission, tackle some of those other little projects. So when we needed to, whether it was just using the budgeted maintenance funds, really trying to be as frugal as we could to make some park improvements. Bayview Park, we put in a little structure there, and Cedar, that's Clear Lake Park. So we've been doing what we can, but there was just that mindset of there wasn't the funding, but use it as a guide as we're able to. And there is the trails component, and I know our city engineer, Ryan Goodman, did a really great job chipping away at some of those trail segments in conjunction with local street projects. So we've taken care of some of those trail priorities, but this just is the park side of things. And so I hope that kind of helps frame that, but it was a guiding document.
And in the park world, there's classifications. One's a community park. So if you take your neighborhood parks, those are the community parks. But neighborhood parks are important, and it helps the sense of the neighborhood. It allows you to bring your kindergartner over there to learn to ride their bike or climb swings, or maybe there's a small ball field that the kids can play. So while community parks are great, really, and if you remember back to when we did the plan, one of the things that were really strong and communicated to us from the public was the need. They wanted the parks, they wanted the trails in the park, and what you don't want free parks to dominate it. You don't want to have people have to get in their cars to get them. I mean, they don't have to be block by block by block. But it is a necessity that neighborhood parks. It does good.
I think that the big piece here is, even on Patrick's presentation, is that 24 to 27 is pretty big. So even if they say, no, we don't want to spend any money, everyone's 24 and 25. There's stuff in 24 that have been replaced in 2020, you know, so it's already 5 years past when it should have replaced. So it's no different than when I came to Public Works and we had 5 dump trucks that were stacked every year, and one of those things you're never gonna get away from. Won't make that big splash by doing a Fenway Park, but it's the same thing as a streets project. You know, you kick that down the road along the streets, and all of a sudden, you have parks is numbers aren't going to go away. They're just going to get more expensive, and they're just going to keep stacking. So
In terms of wanting to evaluate all options, is there ever a plan that is feasible around park decommissioning, of saying, maybe our inventory mix is not right, and maybe there are certain parks that we should repurpose for something else? And I don't know what that looks like. I don't know if that's an option, but are we able to, let's just take an example. I don't even want to pick one because whatever neighborhood I pick is going to not be happy, but to say, we have decided that this particular park, actually, I will say, Shady Trails Park, I walk through it frequently. It is a pass-through from neighborhood to neighborhood. There is nothing there. I'm not sure if anything could be there, but it is an area where we should probably be spending less than zero, other than maybe, like, let's make sure there's not garbage and brush.
And I think that's the eventual point and review of the master plan. Where we spend our money, what part should we develop? Should they be a passive part? Should they be an active? They have evolved. They have to come split. Those things need to be determined. But the whole point here is until after 2027,
It doesn't even matter.
it doesn't matter because this is all parks that are used and have equipment.
I guess maybe my question is even broader is, can we sell that land? I mean, can you sell that land to fund other projects or to like
I would never encourage you to sell parks. That's a decision you make. But land, once it goes away, it goes away.
I know,
It's more
I know.
expensive to get land later. So if you sell this neighborhood park and 20 years down the road, the neighborhood park, and you're
I
gonna
know.
find land, it's gonna be. But to answer your question, is sometimes you can sell park, sometimes you can't. And then that would
how it
be-
acquired. I look at this question like how school districts look at schools, right? Nobody loves closing an elementary school, but it is part of what they have had to make that very difficult decision. And
And I would argue you don't have enough parks. So going back to, my opinion, and some of the material that plan has, your parks are inadequate.
I hear what you're saying, and I appreciate the professional perspective, but we also have lived in a community that up until this point, 100 years, has not used tax dollars to support parks. And so to swing is just really hard.
That's a decision, but in 100 years, you haven't had 100 house parks. So that's, I mean, it is a balancing act, not only for the council, but how to efficiently and smartly use funds that we have used. We're just trying to tell you what we think you need at least. This plan, through 2020. After that, we can start having a discussion about when to Steinway Field. Could we put that off? As youth sports collapse, so we don't need to do that. Those are the things we look at when we get closer. It's like the whole plan, again, back to my point, every year you look at this plan, you see priorities have changed. You know, maybe all the fences at Fenway Field are corroded because of some Chinese steel that didn't work. All of a sudden, we found that out, we're gonna have to replace it.
Are you making that up or is that real?
I'm making it up.
Okay, thank you.
I hope I make it. But, so those are, that's an extreme example, but you
Point
have
being,
to,
yeah, go
you
ahead.
have to look, and you have to, every year, not only is that street plan, everything else. I know this is very difficult for council staff to recommend that we spend this kind of money all at once, parks, for buildings, for streets, equipment, for everything, but again, I'm a broken record, it's because we have to.
So I guess, when you look at this, the Tower Park rinks, was this part of the 2014 plan, the rinks, fields, splash pads, skate park, pavilion, gardens? I mean, that's,
The reason that's in there, again, is if we go forward with the public works facility, we have to figure out repurpose that space. And looking at some of the new data from the draft plan, it shows us short on a number of things that we could put in that part to get us up. Again, when we get there, when we get closer, that's a decision that park board council needs to discuss and make. But it's out far enough to get money back.
but was that determined in the 14 plan? Or
No,
is
that
that?
was added.
Oh, okay.
Now it's in the new plan.
Because I mean, that one in particular, I agree that the rinks down there, they get used, they need an upgrade. I don't know if it's embarrassing or being creative where you share the warming house with the shine shop. I mean, that needs to be,
Yes,
addressed.
it needs definitely, and that's why it's there, but that's why it's that far out.
I've pulled us down into a very project-specific conversation, and I know, like, just like the streets conversation, this was intended to be more project agnostic, more around funding overall. Because I do get back to that we are walking right back into a chicken and egg conversation of put the new park commission in place and say, go forth and do great work, and they're going to say, okay, here's the plan, are you going to fund it? And so I think that we are back to project agnostic, like what, and we thankfully don't need to answer this tonight, but in the very near term, what are we comfortable with into some level of general fund support? Because I think we at least owe some level of financial commitment to that new park commission, or else we're locking them into essentially, what we've historically done, which is do what you can with park dedication, which we know is insufficient. Unless we say that is our plan, and I'm personally not ready to say that, and I think there's a better way. And it's hard to make some financial commitment without details on where that is, but I think that's kind of the needle we need to thread here in the next couple of months, is be comfortable with some level of base funding so that we can then hand that to the park commission. Here's what you have to work with.
Quick question. So I see we're in 2028, and that's where we go, we're done playing catch up and we're looking forward. And that 4.5 million is for the 3 years of upgrades at Fenway Park as it's proposed today. Where's the funding for the 31 and 32 investments at Tower Park? Where does the funding for that come from?
We didn't put any funding in for those yet, just because it's that far out there, where we're looking at what our levy needs to be right now. It's good to have on the radar when you're starting to look 9-10 years out, but this is our discussion now. A lot of things need to fall into place in regards of the public works facility and what direction that part goes. So when you're looking at that, that's why we didn't put anything in the plan for that. If that was, it would probably be at this point looking at bonds, grant funding, any sorts of that nature, state legislature, or anything like that. So that was a reasoning for not putting any bonds in for that specific one. For Fenway being identified in the plan and being more 4 or 5 years out, it felt more reasonable to put something in there that this could be the impact that it is a little bit more.
We're doing that bond issue in 28, but we're not using that money for 3 years. Is that just for a workflow standpoint?
As for a workflow standpoint, it's for work. My understanding is workflow how the work can be done, and by issuing it all in 1 year, you're going to be able to save costs. 3 years is historically where you can issue bonds ahead of time.
Yep.
Where you're not running into any issues with arbitrage with the government and those sort of things. So it is a benefit to just issue that all in 1 year rather than plan that out there. That way the funds are there when you need them.
Where- Yeah. Okay. Yeah. And is the bond repayment in here, or what's the line item where the bonds getting repaid?
That's on some slides coming up. The bonds get paid out when you issue bonds. You have to create its own debt service fund where the specific debt levy, tax levy associated to pay that debt goes specifically into that fund. And the principal and interest get paid out of that fund as well. That's where you don't see any principal and interest comes in here. The funds come in here, and then when the tax levy, separate tax levy, that would be then issued form. That would be tracked.
That's on. That's on top of the 500,000 a year. So that's on top of the 500,000 a year.
That would be on top of 500,000 a year. 500,000 is just in this park fund to basically fund some capital, and we go back a little bit to looking at what we're issuing. For example, 2.5 million in 24, but there's really not a big project. That 500,000 is kind of that reasoning. We need to get a couple playgrounds for 150,000 each. The tax levy's covering those equipment, but since, like David Avenue said, this is all catch-up, so now we have all these parks that are due. So they're adding up to this large amount, where if you're just doing replacing playground equipment one a year, for example, or whatever that is, that 500,000 consistent levy is helping pay for those smaller capital improvements, where the bonds are then for your Fenway, your tower, like your big total construction.
What do we, just one last, some of these park improvements, like looking at Manor Park for 125 in 24, what's the life expectancy of that then? I mean, what do we
About
think we'll get out of
20
that?
years.
20 years. Okay, thank you.
I am maybe doing history a little bit of disservice, because it's not that we haven't put any, it's true we haven't put any general fund towards specific parks in the park budget, but we did build or help to build and did bonding for the YMCA. And I kind of look at that as a one-time, had we not done that, that conceivably those dollars would have gone for other sorts of recreation. It's, you know, kind of an opportunity cost. So that YMCA bond was issued, it was refinanced when we did our city center refinancing, right? No, is it still separate? It's still separate? It'd be good to know what that debt service is each year and then when that matures. Because I do think in terms of like what the community has funded, that is it's important to this topic.
$9 million funding, no question about it. The other question I have too is, you know, we're still spending a certain amount of Dave's budget on parks, period. It probably doesn't show on any of this. You know, we're still using public works for cutting grass and, you know, fixing a fence or whatever. So there's a certain amount of that budget that's going already into parks. Is there any way we can separate that somehow, or at least look at that?
Budgeted amount for maintenance is $650,000.
But that's everything. It's not just parks, all right?
Mowing the grass, and that's just the parks one.
Oh, they're in the parks.
And is that fence repair or things like that? Like, where does that?
Parks, buying hanging baskets.
But not park equipment maintenance.
There's a fund balance in there for that's what Jamie referred to. All depends on what we have left at the end of the year. And just to put in perspective that Reagan at Cedar Park, the net that broke.
That includes like lawn fertilizer and that kind of stuff too, Dave?
What's the annual debt service?
Just over 600,000. 630,000.
And it was, how much was the bond?
Million, wasn't it?
It's under 9 million. 2.9 million.
I
You see that on our schedule for debt coming forward. When you schedule out this debt, it's important when I'm looking at the letters I have, when you have debt, what's the final tax levy? When's the debt falling off? Because if you get your debt structured in a way where you're issuing new debt when an old one's falling off, ideally, then there's not these spikes or increases. You're basically, an old one falling off and replacing it with new debt. So if you can't get it to line up, that's ideal, and that's for as this plan goes forward, and depending on what's adopted with the streets and parks and whatnot. You know, right now, you know, for example, we're rolling, you know, for example, 3 years, maybe the situation, maybe we can asphalt that for the first year, depending on the expense, and issue it a year later, have it line up better with that. So those are the type of things as this plan goes forward, just having it laid out where we can analyze and going through it this year now, going back to these capital plans and just updating it and having it there has been a big time saver, not only for myself and staff. That here's what you had identified for equipment needs in '24. Do you need it? Does it need to get kicked back? What's the increased cost? And
So so the scenario is looking for us to get to an annualized, so so you're looking for us to get to an annual levy of amount of $500,000. Which is,
And that's just equipment and that kind of stuff. It's not, we already talked about the maintenance, you know.
that's a level when looking at the plan, like you're never gonna have cash to pay for $4.5 million. But looking at your playground replacement, trail improvements that are $100,000, $200,000, if you're doing $300,000, $400,000 that, you know, they didn't have cash on hand to pay for that, where you're not having to go out and possibly issue a bond to get that done, or come up with some other funding source. Make those, or end up in the situation where we're now, everything just keeps getting pushed back. So that's where that level has come in to keep up with those type of projects. With that. So scenario, the second scenario, without getting into the weeds, going down in the detail. Difference on this scenario is looking at the taxes, is that we're just increasing that tax levy 50,000 every year. Gradually to get up to 500,000. Follow the plan for until 2032, you would be at 500,000. Difference is when you look at 2024, there's a higher bond issuance of $4 million compared to $2.5 because we're having to issue more debt to play catch up instead of those funds. So that is the difference on this scenario. All the projects are the same, all the years are the same as far as that goes. So that's the difference with it. Any questions on parks? Otherwise, I'd go into the building and analyze that before you kind of look at the impact and what those levies,
I think it's just important for us to illustrate, we asked you to quantify everything, right? And so this feels like a lot, but we also asked you for a lot. So as painful as this is, I appreciate that it is. What I'm hearing is, this is the list as you see it, and it's good to see. It's painful to see it all in one place, but I appreciate the exercise.
okay, on to building maintenance. Okay, so for building maintenance, this is taking into account the city center, the south building, and the senior center. So down below, at the very bottom, there's under the cash balance, there's a capital and maintenance plan. This is a summary in total of all the things identified on that spreadsheet that Patrick showed earlier. There's a lot of details in there, like he mentioned before. So instead of putting all that on here, this was just a summary snapshot of what that is. A lot of these costs for 2024 are things that are past due. are overdue. And specifically with the South Building, you can see it's $360,000. That's a new parking lot that's long overdue, some insulation and siding on there, and then new roof, I believe, utility costs. So looking at this fund, as Patrick mentioned in his slides, for 2024, starting at a $75,000 property tax levy, increasing it to that $150,000 level. I'll get into that on the next scenario a little bit, as it'll be easier to see why that $150,000 was picked. The other funding source in here is a senior center closing line item of $50,000. Before the city took over the senior center, there was a nonprofit, from my understanding, that ran the senior center. That nonprofit is technically still active as a 501c3. They have about $50,000 sitting in that nonprofit. So right now, city staff is working through the legalities of closing that down and having that moved over contributed to the city. So that's what that number represents. One thing that's not accounted for in here, as we mentioned before, is the South Building. That's when you look at the cash balances, there's a pretty large deficit every year. And then identify a funding source for that, and then feel appropriate to put anything in there right now as they're still analyzing that to determine what's the direction of that building, what type of cost we want to see. More for illustrative purposes, that if we do go forward and catch up on a maintenance that this question is quite large dollar amount associated with that. So going to the next page on scenario 2, the difference on this one is on that capital and maintenance plan, I took out the South building expenditures of $360,000 out completely. That's where when you start looking at the cash balance and where we got to $150,000 level, we build up to that level, that pretty much keeps us up with the maintenance that's coming up in 24 and 25, and it sets us up for some rather large, possibly large expenditures in 2028 for the senior center building. It does go a little bit negative there, but just looking at that it's 5 years down the road, and different factors that play into that, where some of the things in there are toilets and carpets and things that are small but can add up to large dollar amounts until we actually go through that and narrow that down some. That's where the $150,000 came from. It really looks like that's the number that not only pays for things in here, but then also does build a fund balance of cash reserves for unexpected things that maybe come up. You have your AC units, you have them planned for 33, for example, but they go off in 2028. Well, we have funds there that we're able to cover those costs. Things like that do happen. Any questions on the building maintenance or how that fund's lining up right now? Otherwise, I'll go into looking at the streets part and build it all over.
I guess the only question I'd have is on the revenue line for scenario 1. I mean, is the rent that MView or Fairview is paying, is that significant enough to even include as a revenue source?
So right now, that's been dedicated to the capital equipment fund 401. So that was a discussion that we had internally. Well, where's that rent? Should it be going into this fund now, if this is how the direction we're going to go? That's a discussion that we certainly can't have, which would impact that, but that's also offsetting some possible levy increases in the 401 fund. So it all goes back to what we're doing with that South building. Are we continuing to rent it? Are we selling it? What's really that plan for that? And it's something where we're going to rehab it, we're going to keep renting it. And there's a very good scenario with that revenue going there, but then we have to reanalyze 401 and make sure that we continue to offset that revenue back. Okay, now the fun tab. So tax levy projections, as I label it, scenario one. The street, all the street, like, let me back up a little bit. So the capital improvement fund, the third line item down, as discussed before, we recommended just bumping that up to 950,000 one time. Excuse me, not one time, bump it up to 950,000 and then maintain that level for the next years and then get that up to 1 million. So that's built in there. The line above the park dedication fund, you can see that it was $50,000 tax levy in '23, with bumping it up to 500,000 and then maintaining that level consistently through 2033. It also does build down in the proposed bonds. Third one down for park improvements, that 2.5 million bonds being issued, and then having a tax levy start in 2024. And then also a couple lines down, there is also park improvements built, park improvement bonds built in, and that is for the possible Fenway. So again, depending on how that looks or what the direction of that is something that could change. But right now, it's just given that it's in the next few years, that maybe that's put something in there just to have it on our radar and your radars as well. Going to the next scenario, scenario two, the two changes on this tab on this sheet compared to the first one is the park dedication fund. You can see that that has a $50,000 increase every year. So we get that 500,000. That changes the amount of bonds that would be proposed to be issued in '24 from 3.5 million to 4 million. So you can see that with that, there's a higher levy that associated with a higher principal and higher interest on those proposed.
Kevin, what's the inflation rate we're using on the general fund? I see that's increasing each year.
The general fund is built on a 5% increase annually with any positions that were identified in the previous years that we added.
The inflation impact?
So the inflation impact is 5%. And then last year through the 2023 budget process, staff said, here's our plan for staffing needs for the next 10 years. So any staffing that was identified in those years, for example, there was a new CSOs, were put in for next year. Those dollar amounts for what a CSO would be are added into that.
We'll update that in the budget process, whether that's the board, but also, remember, we got all our labor contracts that are settled at about that, so.
Well, I guess, I mean, it's reasonable to include inflation for those sorts of things. Is it reasonable to think that we won't need to increase some of these funds with inflation as well?
The debt funds are going to be set. When you issue debt, they're going to give you a specific schedule saying this is the amount that you need to levy every year.
No, I get that.
So for that, it's straightforward, but you're exactly right with capital, with the park. EDA, all those other funds are paying for equipment. That's where this plan is so important. It needs to be revisited each year. Just a couple days ago, I sent out all the department heads, here's what the equipment you identified for '24. Please let me know, do you still need it? And update the cost. We're in this group when vehicles, the cost was going like this. Ideally, they start to flatten out or start to come back down. But if those costs are still rising, if we budgeted a pickup truck for $50,000 land, we put it in, we identified it in 2024 for $50,000. Well, now it's a year later. It's still $50,000. Is it $45,000, or did it skyrocket? Now it's $70,000. Put that cost in. So that's where these plans are a very great tool, but when they're constantly being addressed and when they're really used as a tool to create the budget. Not only the current year budget, but to plan out so you can see the path that the city needs to go on from every aspect of that.
Two is that in the last few years, we've seen testing out the very release outdoor outreach. So we're hoping that will go on. Try to plan for that. And that we will update those for the 20th of November to see if they're close to what we think.
5%'s the inflationary index, and what are you, where are we for interest rates? Like, what did, I know you don't have a crystal ball, but are you, do you have some, are you modeling this with current interest rates or?
For debt?
Yeah, for the debt service.
3.5. You know, it's a pretty good number. So you're gonna be high, you're gonna be low, and that's where you can look at it as a mortgage, you know, you could get, you follow this plan and you adopt it, but then 2 years down the road, those rates are 5%, right? Well, to keep going with the plan or do you go back down that road of kicking it down the road, and that's where the city issued some bonds in 2019 and refunded some of those bonds that are at a highest interest rate because at the time it was issued, they needed funds, but then rates came down, and that's where we're really close to the powers who run consulting. And I reach out to them or talk to them, they're looking at our bonds and they can tell me if you refinance this bond or refund it, you're gonna save. Sometimes we do $1 million. So, those are things that when we're looking at and roll those into the same bond and be creative with how you do it, with save interest, save issuance costs, and
Yeah, what, it was really a low interest rate back then, wasn't it, like 1%?
somewhere in this 325 pages of this.
Well, I'm pulling that out of my memory, and there's
It was either the one.
I just,
We had a big, we had a lot of, the thing about that is, the nice thing about larger bonds is it attracts more bidders. And if it attracts more bidders, you get that. Or you get that. So, a $19 million bond, very attractive bond. Very good. You start getting up into that kind of, actually, I think the bond is
it would command this building.
combine this building with some, the streets and a few other things that we refinance. Really get up there, we got a lot of business there. Really save it there.
When there's areas of our budget that are easy, lend themselves closer to user fees and lend themselves more towards alternative sources of revenue other than just tax levy. Did the park plan talk about any of that? About, I don't know, and I don't know what other cities have done to solve for this, but some sort of a park sticker. I don't know what that looks like, but some sort of usage fee or, Fenway is used, by a lot of youth sports organizations that have maybe a different ability to pay than a neighborhood park. And again, we're in the land of no good options, and so this is me just spitting out bad ideas that nobody really likes, but I think we should at least.
Park user fees, can be a good idea. Access to theater. The problem is we don't run a lot of programs, so we don't have, like a state park, you don't have a central entrance that you can stop people and pay with the neighborhood park. Lake there. Not the, we've got limited options for
I guess one comment too is just keep in mind, I know I follow the park side of things and, Hugo just developed a brand new park and I don't know if you've seen it, but it's drawing a lot of people there. Lino Lakes just put in a new park and that's just, replacing old equipment. So it really attracts people to those areas. I know the first few years is kind of catch-up work and replacing and putting in some new equipment, but really, obviously keeping in mind that really people moving to communities really like new families. They like a good, strong parks and trail system. And as the community continues to grow and new developments come in, I think that in the long run, it will help and, attract people here and increase the tax base to help offset that down the road. So I always keep track of what our neighboring communities are doing. And if you haven't been to Hugo, like that's an amazing park. They just invested in that. So just keeping that in mind of the economic impact and getting people into Forest Lake. And with the Parks Commission, we did talk a lot about keeping people here in the community. We have people leaving Forest Lake quite often for different activities and going to different parks and such. So just my little parks plug on the importance and really keeping that in mind in the big picture to get them back and something that the community is proud of. So.
Oh, the park where over by where we live, it's busy all the time. It just, there's no place to park sometimes. Oh, I mean, all depends on how much cooperation we can get from taxpayers. They're footing the bill. I'd like to hear from them. Because I think you're gonna have a lot of them that would support, extra money into the parks. And of course, you're gonna, I don't know what the ratio is, but
As we, even before we get into each one of these park projects kind of requires its own separate level of planning, but before we even get into that, I do think some communication document or something that can help kind of illustrate the path we're on and the types of like current state versus what the planned upgrades would be, I think is just really helpful. It's a story of a lot of small projects and a lot of catch up of things done. And I think people generally are aware of the condition of their community park right by where they live, but it's easy to forget about just how many of them we have and the overall condition. Your point, kind of telling that story is, I think, helpful.
I don't want to get into the YMCA.
And I don't mean to, I support the YMCA. It's just that I also though look at that is, as much as we might say we don't have general fund dollars going to recreation, we do. We have $600,000 a year going to a recreation facility. It just happens to not be owned by the city, which was by our design.
Annual budget that year.
But there is, I mean, those are real dollars that do have impact, and it's a opportunity cost for sure of, that means that some of these other projects haven't been done.
Mention the land that it's sitting on.
So I just keep hearing the catch up. We need to catch up on this. We need to catch up with this. And so to make, it's really a frightening thought. I think that this council has to be the ones to play catch up on all of these different areas. We're looking at over doubling the from 13 to 12 to 29 million in 2033.
Daunting.
So I don't know if it's picking and choosing which the priorities of where to catch up first at has to happen. I just, to start, this whole thing is really.
back to your original comment, Patrick, around the last, last episode of this series. This is it, right? This,
There are no more components that you have to see.
okay.
Covered, we show you the general fund, obviously that may change. That's our operating. But we know the capital fund, which is our capital equipment fund, we've shown you that, what it's gonna take, we're gonna talk about that. We show you the capital improvement fund, which includes streets and other things. But you know the number. You don't have to worry about the utility, that's also state. We show you the park fund, we show you the building, we don't have to worry about the airport, that's in good shape. That's the share we get from the fund. I think you've seen everything. It's just depending on, really focus, probably when you focus on the capital fund. All of the new streets, and all of the, and the park fund, because those are two your big things. So I don't know what else I would give you right now. I think we've covered everything. Obviously, it could be more, but I just don't.
I think, the council has a lot to chew on here, there's no question about it. But at the same time, you gotta know the truth, you gotta know what's going on. And if there's a way that we can figure out some answer to this,
That's why we're here. That's why we did, that's why 3 years ago, whatever the plan said, infrastructure fund, parks. Two things, and then that worked into, well, we know where we're at, how do we get there? And that's when we switched to a 10-year plan. We switched to a 10-year plan. Most capital plans for this are 5 years, but we get, oh, we're gonna get 5 years. Close. That's what we were doing. And 10 years is of course, based on how far we went.
Well,
But
bes-
at least it's a starting.
besides the levy, what other options do we have as far as raising money? Is there,
You don't have a lot. You have a levy. You have a possible sales tax. We will look at anything else, but local government is not charter government, that we are. Yeah, we can raise fees. It's really levy and sales tax, and may get some money, depending on what the legislature does, with local share. Yeah,
can't count on it, that's for sure.
can't count on it. I think the last number I saw, we don't get a local share anymore as far as operating. We actually did. So we went down to 0 for 2 years. I think the new formula gets us a lot. Yeah, you're limited. We will continue to look and give you suggestions on other opportunities as far as, and you need it, parks, perfect for grant. You know, we talk about that, but yeah, sales tax.
Well, the only other thing you can count on is development coming, especially commercial development. It's gonna help on down the road. That would soften the blow some, for sure.
That's why it's important to keep the orders up.
That brings up another subject, we're not gonna go there, but
But you see the importance of building tax. Sacrifice any of that.
Maybe an area of just a check-in point, the scenarios that have been placed in front of us have 2 years of sizable increase. So you've got 2 spikes, and then you've got more nominal increases in those other years. Personally, I like that approach. I think it's easier to talk about kind of set expectations on, we've got two, if we are going to accomplish this plan, we are going to do it with 2 large spikes, and we can communicate that, you can communicate what that is for. Personally, I'd rather us commit to a couple of large, again, spikes, rather than, I would be nervous with us trying to like smooth this out. I just think it dumbs it down, it creates opportunities for less commitment along the way. Things, I think, kind of fall apart if we aren't committed to some level of, okay, we're gonna take a big bite here, and to being able to identify when those are, I think is helpful. And I've swung a little bit both ways on this as I've thought, because part of me is also like, well, if you just smooth it out a little bit, it just becomes the norm. And I just feel like this community is going to really struggle with a norm that is double-digit increases every year for 10 years. And I'm not sure if that's how that math would turn out, but Kevin's nodding his head. It's probably not too far off. I just think that's untenable, and just feels like it's just this runaway uncontrolled versus we can at least communicate to a couple of, might be the only like concrete feedback I have at this point.
I mean, we can consult with our, with our, I don't know, pretty solid. I also misspoke about not having any capacity. You need to fix our infrastructure. We also need to look at that. I don't think keep that in the back of your mind. Maybe that's an extra that that's sitting out there. Have a plan that you really want to go forward with. But how do you do it? That when you go to say. So just keep that in your head.
I'm glad you corrected that. Other thoughts, points of feedback as we kind of digest this information? Open to some feedback on, timing to bring a park commission, reappoint the park commission. There's some benefit to having, many eyes at the table and people understanding where we're at. I do know we have had a park board and a park commission, and both ultimately, there's a lot of frustration around just scope of work and funding. And so, I wanted to at least hold off till we got through this meeting. I'm open to, we don't have a budget answer for them now, but, to bring them in and, start, certainly having them be part of the budget conversations this summer. I think there's some benefit to that. But there really is an important part of their work that is missing, in that we kind of have this question mark over their
We have to explore
available funding.
every idea that's out there.
And to that point, having more, seats at the table, more people at the table and more ideas I think there's value to that.
So I guess my thought on that is, this is coming from a plan that, this from a 2014 plan, which was some time ago, and then a new draft apparently. I think having them come on board sooner than later and charge them with, what do you think of this? Is this something that still is relevant than it was X amount of years ago? And I think, just with talking, I think this council is agreeable to some of this, maybe not all the exactly what, but I mean, we realize, I think we're on consensus that we realize we need to do something here. We need to play some kind of catch up. So there's going to be some, I would think, some funds there to, like, give them that direction with those monies. What it exactly is, hard to tell, but I think the sooner the better we can get them on board, and also, maybe invite that previous board to have some input on this. Important.
I had invited both of them to be at this meeting. To make it, but yeah, certainly.
I think the other part of that scenario is kind of looking at our surrounding communities and find out what they're doing with levies in comparison with taxes, and where are we? Are we way high? Are we way low? Where are we? Let's find out where we are and try to be fair with everybody.
I do know that the Hugo, that Hugo plan came together. That was 10 years in the works for them to, the concept plan to what is the funding, and them, selling that bond census. And so it was not, it was long, it was a long time in the making. All right. Any other points of feedback? Patrick, Kevin, anything else for us? Okay. With that, 2024 budget priorities.
Well, let's go. With number 8.
Oh, yeah, I'm sorry. Didn't mean to skip that.
Knowing that public works building necessity enough, we had budgeted from 2020. 2023, for needs assessment. Like you tell you that we put that out before we even know the amount of costs, all that stuff. We need to know what that might be. So we're doing our higher firm. All the other stuff that we would need to plan for, then some kind of estimated cost that's associated with that. We can't move forward, you can't move forward with the decision whether you want to do it, whether you don't want to do it, whether you want to participate. You need to do that now, so we know what that number is as well. So unless I hear differently, we will decide for that. Work. With that, I would like to suggest possibly, since we do not have a DDA meeting next month, is that the council meets with the public works at 6 o'clock. So we can show you the public works building. So you get an idea of why we're talking about going, finding, getting to do it. I think it's important. I think in the long run, you save yourself money. Building a new building with all your equipment inside is not for weather. You're not, you save labor time. You're not going to 6 different locations to get your equipment and so forth and so on. I think you all need to see that. So unless there's an objection, we would schedule a meeting for it at 6 o'clock. If you're available.
Yeah, I just checked my calendar, I'm good.
It's okay with me.
I think that's a great idea.
And that's what we'll do.
And
So
we'll
that's all I have on the public
tour
works.
at 6 o'clock and then we'll meet there at 7.
I believe that we'll meet at 6 and we can walk.
What was budgeted for the needs assessment? Do you want that
I
down?
believe it was 50,000.
50,000 in 2023.
So we had a draft, I had a draft that I looked at, but we want to sometime in our draft, put it on the street. That's the public works building. As far as budget priorities, I asked at the last meeting, and you may not have that yet, but if you have ideas that you think should be in the budget, you need to know what those are, so we can cost them out. So we'd like them sooner than later. Probably in the next, I would say the latest next, like the 15th of June. So we can look at them if we have to cost something out. You can email them to me, you can email them to Kevin. You can have them at the next workshop if you want to, whatever the case may be. We need to know. We ask this every year. What are your priorities? What do you want us to look at? What do you want us to add? Do you have any concerns? So if we have those, we appreciate you. Through those, changes or major issues.
Anyone have anything immediately that is on your punch list you'd like to mention?
That's what I can think of for me.
I suspect this may be lower, and given the size of what we just talked about, this is a smaller reach, but I think clarifying the landscaping downtown, we've talked about doing updated banners, working with the Lions Club on updated banners. It is maybe in conjunction with something around some sort of code enforcement or some sort of policy on the weedy lots and the lots that aren't getting snow removal. It's when we talk about our downtown, it's the one thing that I think is in our 100%, it's more in our control than some of the other factors downtown, and I think it's high impact for relatively low dollar. And maybe I don't have appetite right now for anything bigger.
Just get into Kevin Stevens. Thank you, that's all we had.
Excellent. And with that, we are at the end of our planned agenda. I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor signal by saying aye.
Aye.
Oppose? The motion carries. Thank you, everyone. We're adjourned.